Now, to lead the panel, I will invite to the stage here Mr. Taimar Peterkop, who, despite his youth age mistake of becoming a lawyer, has ended up now as the Director General of the Estonian Information Systems Authority, effectively our Estonian National Cybersecurity Agency. Taimar, all yours. Good luck.
Thank you. Could I have my panelists please join me here at the stage? Please. So we have an excellent panel, as always, consisting of. I'll start with you, Despina, from DG Connect. You're, I'm sorry, I have to. It's
the European Commission.
Yes, European Commission, DG Connect. But your title says that you're responsible for our Prime Minister said that that we need to have trust towards the digital society, so you're responsible for producing that trust. Director for Digital Society, Trust and Cybersecurity at DG Connect. Heli Tiirmaa-Klaar is Head of Cyber Policy Coordination at the European External Action Service. So we have a good Commission representatives here. Mr. Cyril Cuvillier is from France, ANSSI, Deputy Director of the External Relations and Coordination. So we have a member state here, Dr. Krasimir Simonski from Bulgaria, Deputy Chair of the State eGovernment Agency. And Martin Ruubel, representing the industry view here, from Guardtime, President of Guardtime, so welcome you all here. What we try to do here today, or what we will do, is in 1 hour explain the cybersecurity package that the EU has produced and give feedback to it as well. So that's a very rare opportunity to get it all in a nutshell. So how we will start is that first Casimir, as a representative of TRIO, the presidency member states, will give you an overview of what we were planning to do in cyber during our Estonian, Bulgarian, and Austrian presidency of the Council. And then we'll hear from Despina how overwhelmingly Commission did much more than we thought that we will be handling during our presidencies. Heli will complement on that, and then we hear a reaction from a member state and an industry of what Commission is doing. And you all have a chance then to jump in and share your thoughts as well. So please, we'll start with Casimir.
Thank you, Taimar. I really appreciate to be here. And first, congratulations on organizing this event and overall for your efforts to bring cybersecurity in this top agenda, political and so on. And on the other hand, I mean, you raised the expectations so high. When our turn is as of January, it will be difficult to match this level, but we'll do our best. Yeah, well, we were initially thinking of going through the presidency trio program, but listening to discussions and to the items that are here as topics, it's more or less, I can put it in one sentence. I mean, it fits perfectly. It supplements, actually. And when we developed our trio program, that was 3-4 months ago, now I feel like I've been prophet, sort of, to see in the future, but it's not that difficult to think the same way, I would say, because kind of all roads go to Rome, as they used to say, so all ways we do the things at the end they converge. And the keyword here is cooperation. Always we're doing the things, they bring us to cooperation and think how to cooperate. And one observation from today, discussions and presentation is that actually everybody was talking about cooperation. I don't know whether you sense that. It's in everybody's speech. The good question is, and everybody was agree that this is the way. The good question is, if we all agree that cooperation is the key, or it has to be, why are we still discussing this? If we agree that we have to cooperate, why do we do still those discussions, etc.? And it happens that there are issues to reach this cooperation. It's a good target, but we have to be aware of the realities and that reaching agreement, it has its price, it has its issues to be solved, and I call them conveniently contrasts rather than contradictions or something else, having in mind that we should avoid contradictions between those issues and try to refer to them really as contrasts, respecting the differences that we have all involved here and looking for the best way they to live together. Well, we all know of those who are dealing with philosophy that it's a dual world. It's polarized. It's always negative and positive, male, female, and so on and so on. So talking about cybersecurity this way, talking about cyber, which we used to call information society, internet society, just internet environment, etc. Now we just call cyber, which more or less is also meaning cybersecurity in most of the references we have to this term. So what contrast we can refer to? That are a little challenging, and I think perfectly would fit here with the discussion that we are trying to organize within this hour. And I'll just mention a few of them. Let's start with public and private. The contrast between public and private, government and private. That's something that I'm really pleased to see in all the documents, especially in the certification framework, in the cyber strategy all over, and just marking that we're talking for different nature of approaches, and that it's not contradictory, as I said before, but we have to respect the contrast. This is where the power comes from, all those differences. Everybody can bring something to the space. And what may bring this is the issue of trust, actually, because trust is what the business needs, trust is what the government needs, etc. And that was the other keyword I've heard today. I'm really pleased that we're going this way. Well, other worth mentioning contracts, if we're talking, for instance, for the framework for joint EU diplomatic response, which is in our plan as well, the trio, that's the gap between awareness and decision making. There is still a way to move from awareness to decision making, and I think we're on the right way. We already start designing the framework, first thing as a framework, and then next thing to do is talking about the guidelines, talking about practices, to develop communication procedures, which is another concern, serious. Still other contrasts we can find in the way to deal with the certification package. It's the contrast between technology and policy. Well, let's not forget that technology actually is where the things start. The technology is disruptor to the policy. Every new technology kind of bring need for new policy. And as fast as we move from realizing all those changes and bringing them to policy, that's really something we have to think of. Time is crucial. Time is becoming really serious factor. And I really like the approach with the strategy and the package. Better have the package now as soon as possible, rather than wait everything to be perfect, let's say, but then, I mean, the circumstances are different and you have to start all over again. And I think that's something that we have to, okay, time is going on. Just will mark other contras, technologies developed outside the European Union and those that are within the European Union. The great contrast between being restrictive in our measures and being open or respect the privacy. We have a very good experience with ACTA and several other. Talking about encryption policy, etc., that's something that we have to find the right formula or the right balance between them. Contrast between national and EU level, what we are talking about operational at the moment, is an attempt to try actually this contrast to be addressed and find the right balance between them. And another thing is contrast between the member states. We have well-developed member states in terms of cybersecurity with their sophisticated systems, artificial intelligence, machine learning, all those things, technologies, etc. And then we have countries even without certs, right? And how we actually also address these contrasts in the best way for all of them, not to disrupt those developed with their development, and at the same time help the others actually match this level, because we are talking for a common environment, EU at EU level. Well, finally, just to say that what doesn't kill us makes us stronger, and I think what we have to look for outcome of all our efforts is that after every attack, after every incident, we can really stronger and stronger, and the practice so far and development so far proves that's the case. That's for the starter. Thank you.
Thank you. Despina, from the presidency, this package that the Commission came up with yesterday, it's very ambitious. We are very happy to see an ambitious package that faces the threats that, or addresses the threats that we are facing. Could you please give us, you cannot of course give us an overview of all the 800 pages as Vice President Ansip said.
I can try.
But the highlights of what you did yesterday.
Thank you. Taimar is afraid because I gave a 1-hour presentation yesterday at the cooperation group. I know I cannot repeat that today. So thank you very much. Thank you all, because throughout the day I have been hearing your comments and been taking notes on the first reactions to the package. And for the European Commission, it is very encouraging to hear from everyone that this is indeed something that people endorse and embrace as an ambitious and necessary approach. And I think this was our idea, this was our objective. And you said, Taimar, in your opening remarks, that what we presented was more than you expected. The question is whether it is enough for what is needed. So this is what we try to do. We try to build up on existing instruments and an existing approach and try to fill the gaps and get better prepared. And I will stick to the internal market aspects because you have the best possible person next to me, my colleague from the External Action Service, on the international cooperation aspects, which are of course fundamental. So I will focus on 3 areas. So the first thing we try to do is to increase the EU's capacities to face current cyber challenges, especially in case of a large-scale incident. And we did that through various documents that are part of this rather large package. The first is the Cybersecurity Act. The Cybersecurity Act is a legislative proposal, the only legislative proposal that was tabled yesterday, consisting of 2 big chapters. The first is the mandate for the Cybersecurity Agency, ENISA, known as ENISA, a reformed ENISA that would be able to face today's cybersecurity challenges. We were under an obligation to evaluate how this agency has performed, like we do for all agencies, but also in view of the evolving threat landscape that we have been discussing. And one of the main conclusions of this evaluation was that indeed this agency is not equipped to deal with the current EU cybersecurity challenges. And on top of that it would actually be also not desirable to dismantle this agency because it has started to prove its EU added value. So we wanted to build on that block and at the same time add on what was necessary. So this is a proposal for a mandate that is permanent, because it remains an agency that has a deadline of life, and cybersecurity is not an area that will go away. So we go for a stable status, equipping with resources that are fit for purpose. Nobody should think that we are creating an enormous agency, but we're creating an agency where we have to invest the right resources for the agency to deal with its tasks. And thirdly, of course, we are looking at these tasks to make sure that they are focused, that they are specific, and they complement what is needed for the member states. And this is not just about trust, it is about the cooperation we have discussed. It is about making Europe also better equipped to respond to cybersecurity challenges. And then when it comes to large-scale incidents, we have included in the tasks of ENISA a role in coordinating, extending what already exists in the role of ENISA with the CSIRT network that was created by the NIS directive, but also adding a recommendation for a blueprint, so something that would become immediately effective, which is basically a recommendation for member states to create a common system that could be put together in case of a large-scale incident. So it's a recommendation that calls on member states to work together, so further cooperation, to create national systems that then would be talking to each other and be brought together in case of a large-scale incident, to create a common taxonomy so that they can speak the same language in case there is such an incident. And then there is an annex, which is a playbook that says who does what, because we have many actors today. We have the CSIRT network, we have Europol, we have EC3, we have ENISA, we have the role of the institutions, the CERT-EU of the institutions. So this is a playbook that says who does what, something we didn't have until today. We only have it for hybrid threats. So this is for the large-scale incidents and in general for response. Then we needed to build something that was mentioned widely today on a cybersecurity single market, strengthening the industry, strengthening our cybersecurity internal market. And this is done with the second chapter of the Cybersecurity Act, which is on certification, creating an EU system of certification. This has not come out of nowhere. We had announced it already last year in a communication on increasing the resilience of Europe to cybersecurity attacks, to cyber attacks. So it is something that has been the outcome of multiple consultations and multiple workshops that we have made actually with all of you. It is a legal proposal that proposes an EU voluntary system for certification, so it's not something that is mandatory, and the idea is to produce European schemes where once certified in one member state, then you have recognition in the rest of the internal market. And this is where it will create also the cost efficiencies that were mentioned by some representatives of national agencies earlier today, because you will have a one-stop shop approach based on very well-defined assurance levels. There are 3 assurance levels, specific requirements that have to be met by schemes, and also a governance system in which ENISA also plays a very important role, but also a new body that is created, the certification board of member states, that will also have a very important role in approving these schemes. So this is part of our efforts for the single market. Of course, strengthening the cybersecurity market also means building up on our expertise and knowledge. And this is where our proposal for creating a European competence center for research and innovation that would also bring together a network of the national centers of excellence in cybersecurity. We are not ready with a concrete proposal, but you can find in the joint communication that was issued yesterday the seeds for this idea. This is about building the strategic capacity of the EU in cybersecurity, building knowledge, research, innovation, contributing to digital technologies. So this is really a big sustainable effort going through to the future and developing to something really important that is now missing, and giving not only the public but the private sector very much needed capacity. And of course, we are matching that with a couple of proposals for rapid response needs, which again are not meant to present a patchy approach. They're supposed to be part of a system. The first is the proposal for a cybersecurity emergency fund, a fund that would be available to help member states with financial, mostly, help in case of a large-scale incident where there is an immediate mobilization of funds, but again, subject to conditions like member states that have built already the national capacity, that have respected their obligations under the NIS directive, that have a proper system, but really simply need emergency response. And of course, something that was very much discussed in the last panel, building a very strong skills base in cybersecurity, and not just creating IT experts, more cybersecurity IT experts, but building in cybersecurity in all the fields of academia, be that law, economics, etc., because that's a skills base we're missing, and you know that we're already looking at 350,000 people short in the EU when it comes to cybersecurity skills. And of course, a very important part of the package was a communication on the implementation of the NIS directive, which is one of our objectives on ensuring that what we have is properly and equally implemented in the EU. We heard today about how some countries are stronger than others. The NIS aims to develop a system where everybody is equal and everybody is equipped, and to help with the implementation of the directive in advance and now with the transposition, we have prepared a communication on very important chapters of the directive that should help not just member states develop their strategies, but also digital service providers understand better the requirements of the directive. So this is building on what we have. Now, just to conclude with some remarks that are also inspired by comments made earlier today. The idea is not, for instance, for existing systems to disappear. I heard about the existing system of certification that applies under SOGAES for 13 member states. The idea is not to make that disappear, but to create an EU certification framework that is valid for 27, 28, so for the whole internal market, for all member states. So we propose measures and actions that will help all CSIRTs become strong, not just some, but all. And we propose measures that will also make the only agency we have that works on network and information security also stronger. It is not about replacing the capacity of the member states. The operational cooperation that we propose, it is tailored to complement what the CSIRTs do and what the member states are supposed to do. So it's not supposed to substitute, but just to add on. So I hope that gives you a quick overview of the main measures proposed, at least for the internal market aspects.
Heli, I heard the thought today that there's a gap in the world that needs to be filled, and that gap is a global leadership on cybersecurity, that considering what other countries' relationship is to cyberspace, that those other global players cannot really take that role. So do you agree that the European Union should take that role, and if so, then what are the steps that we are planning to take?
Thank you for inviting EAS to speak here, and thank you for a very interesting question. The EU has published recently the global strategy, but the global strategy, when you read it, talks mostly about the EU own resilience. So it's a bit of a paradox there, right? The common foreign and security policy and common security and defense policy measures in cybersecurity are also described in the new joint communication, which you have had an opportunity to already see since it came out yesterday. But let me first maybe do some theoretical introduction of what the global cyberspace looks like. We are now at the saturation point where the Western countries have 90%, 95% of saturation point of internet users. So we can't grow bigger. There is a fixed number of people we have on our soil. However, these 2.5 billion internet users right now are not the whole reserve. The 5 billion internet users, 6 billion internet users will be becoming online, and they are outside of the Western world or advanced, technologically advanced world. So right now, we have still a chance and opportunity. EU, the US, Australia, Canada, Japan, South Korea, maybe set standards and have some leadership role here. But at some point, when the numbers will grow, then the majority of the users and possibly also the majority of the debate would move further. It will move away from our small, nice, cozy Western club. So we have to be kind of prepared for that moment. Maybe it's too early now to speak about this, but therefore, I'm describing some actions what the European Union is doing in order to meet that challenge when we will have it. I think it was very brilliant that the Commission has put together the package, and there is certification and internal market measures which will surely help to install the European resilience and also maybe leadership role in standard setting, because the standard setting is now the new avenue where everybody has some say, and many countries in the world would like to become the leading powers in standard setting. Standard setting would also lead to the economic growth at some point, and if the EU is not taking leadership now here, then we might be in a position where we are going to follow the standards made by others. So therefore, I think we have to applaud the Commission steps here. On foreign policy side, what we are doing, we are basically concentrating on two very important work streams here. First, we have to make sure that while all this technology is developing and all these malicious cyber tools are out there, the governments also agree on certain set of rules, how this technology is used. We have in conventional weapons, in disarmament issues, we have a pretty clear understanding how many nuclear warheads, how many troops or how many tanks all the countries have. In cyber, this is not really happening yet. We still have to see the way how we do it. There are some global processes that the UN has the group for governmental experts. The OSCE has agreed on two sets of confidence building measures. First, transparency measures, and second, cooperation measures, which are very important. We are promoting the same confidence building approach in cyber outside of the European Union, in Asia, and maybe some other regional organizations will take it up. But there is one very important point for you to remember in this audience. We are not agreeing with each other globally whether the current international law applies in cyberspace. And this is a bit dangerous. We have to agree that the current international law, meaning international humanitarian law, jus in bello, how the warfare is done, and jus ad bellum, how a war will start, our UN Charter apply in cyberspace, because if we don't have this clarity of mind that the international law principles, we do not attack civilians, we only do the proportional attacks. We, as countries, agree on the same principles as we do in conventional attacks. If this is not applying in the future cyber conflict, then we don't know where we are going to. And therefore, it is very important that we are working on mainstreaming the current international law, the existing international law, into the cyberspace. And this is what the European Union will put a lot of effort, and also hopefully we will see some future activities very soon on this coming up. In multilateral fora and also outside of the governmental fora for the larger public. So having said this, international security is important, rules between the countries are important. We also have to think of all those new 2.5 billion users of internet that are outside of the Western world. They are coming from India, from Brazil, from Africa, from Asia. And the current status, for instance, with cybercrime legislation in Africa, is that less than half countries in Africa have the cybercrime legislation that allows them to investigate and prosecute cybercrime domestically. So we have to really run very fast there in order to address the cyber threats, which are becoming more and more global. The rate of the technological development in the developing countries is very fast. They are stepping many steps. They are skipping many steps which we made, and they still are taking the newest technology in use. And to make sure that we have the minimum capacity in these countries to address cybercrime and to deal with incident response is absolutely adamant. And the EU, in this new communication, has called for 2 initiatives to set up the capacity building network first, between all the different EU internal stakeholders, and then also to have some capacity building guidelines, because we want to do capacity building according to the EU core values, meaning that we are not infringing freedom of expression and human rights while we are helping those third countries. So I think there is the avenue where we all have to collaborate with our technical partners from national cyber agencies, from civil society, universities, academia, and there is a lot of potential in our different countries here to help the third countries. Having said that, these are the global activities and external activities. Of course, we are also leading the dialogues with our key strategic partners. We are leading the EU coordination in all multilateral fora and so on. But let me also turn to our EU own internal response to cyber threats. We have adopted the joint EU diplomatic response framework for malicious cyber activities, or cyber diplomacy toolbox, which was mentioned already in the morning here. It's a brilliant initiative by the Dutch presidency, which has been going now forward under the Estonian presidency. And we are almost there with our clear plan how we respond to the malicious cyber activities, and how we share information, and what exactly are those political mechanisms what we are taking in order to respond. We can do statements, declarations, sanctions, different EU measures. It's also important that we step up our crisis management capacity. There was a very good exercise last week here in Tallinn between the Ministers of Defense. It was called Cyril, and the Estonian Ministry of Defense has put together a brilliant 2-hour tabletop strategic level exercise for all the ministers and High Representative Mogherini. And I hope that now all the defense ministers understand what is zero-day vulnerability. So this was the aim. Of course, we tested the political crisis management mechanisms. With this, both defense issues and EU-NATO cooperation are also very important, which are the 2 work streams where we are going to concentrate in the future. And there is a cyber defense policy framework that we have been implementing for 2 years already, and some other defense activities, but all these defense activities, which are now also foreseen in the joint communication, are the good new avenues where we have to really intensify our efforts. So I'll stop here.
Thank you. We need to speed up a bit in order to let the audience to ask questions as well. Cyril, what is your first response when you heard or read about the cybersecurity package?
Well, good morning, everybody. I think it was said this morning on the screens on the right and the left by the Minister Majobi. As he said, we very much welcome the ambition of this package of the Commission, and now we are 100% committed to get it implemented. And on those aspects, of course, we are already making the list of all what we need to think about and how we will get this done. And we think that, first of all, the voluntary commitment of the member states is a great approach for them to be committed to the task, and also that we could build the implementation of this package upon the experience that has been achieved up to now. And one example to illustrate this is maybe amongst the package, the part concerned with the certification framework. So I will just have a few ideas on this. As it was said this morning, maybe for a very simple device, a self-certification is an idea. And we know that in doing this, we can build upon the awareness of the industrial actors and of the consumers. So awareness may help to have security by design, and this example has been greatly shared this morning. And then we know that after a certain level of security needed, we should help the industry capacity to grow, and in doing so, we should have a third-party certification that would be able to make an assessment about the conformity of what has been built. And in doing so, we have various examples of certification bodies that we know how to implement. But, and this may help before device and services enter to the market to make sure that we protect our citizen, and that for us it's a very good, good thing that we will implement this more and more. Then we have the level of expertise, which is needed to add efficiency assessment to the conformity assessment. And for this, I would say it's a very important thing to take into account as we speak about critical infrastructures, as we think about everything that hackers may wish to destroy, because hackers do not work by taking a list and looking after a check that is missing in order to know how to get in. They really have an approach when they try to test the efficiency of the system or the service in its whole. And so we have this experience that this efficiency assessment is a complementary to the conformities that makes an evaluation higher as a level of evaluation. And then we've learned that even though we have a third-party evaluation composed of those two, conformity and efficiency assessment, we need to make sure that the one who delivers the evaluation has been reviewed by its peers. And we have this great experience of the European Cybersecurity Certification Group, whose members are able to evaluate those who maintain and develop the greatest expertise to go into those efficiency assessments. So I think this will bring capacity building at the level of the maturity and the level of expertise, and why not to the level of attribution, if we want one day better understand what's going on as far as our critical infrastructures are concerned, for example. And I say critical infrastructures, but we can think also to the pacemakers, we can think to everything that would have in question the life of the people. And so to make all this, the coordination is another principle, and we know that ANSSI will have a definitive mandate, which is a great news as well, because then we will have this entity which will help in a continuous time to coordinate all these efforts. And so, well, this is it. This is what I wanted just to illustrate, that we have very much example, and if we want to have a capacity building all over Europe, as we said this morning, we need to have people to talk to, we need to have experts to talk to, and it will be a great thing not to bring them all to the same point, but help member states to maintain those expertise and help them grow. And then European level will be a great hub for expertise and coordination. Thank you very much.
Martin, same question, but from the industry perspective.
Yes, so thank you for an invite here. And first, I really want to congratulate the Commission, the directorates, the member states for actually putting together this kind of a rather substantial package. So we received it yesterday, so we haven't really gone through it properly, but still something. So you introduced me as a president of Guardtime, and this is entirely correct, but I think in this setting it's a little bit more important that I also at the board of the European Cybersecurity Organization, EXO, vice chair there, and incidentally we happened to have a board meeting yesterday, so you can guess what was one of the main topics there. I would like to kind of give you a little gist of what was discussed there and what was seen as excellent and what was seen as something requiring perhaps a little bit more discussion on the strategy side. So, on the positive stuff, I mean, the most positive thing really is that the strategy exists, and I was very sincere in congratulating the ones who actually made this happen, because it's an important message. It outlines the kind of topics, and all the main topics are really there. So there is no question about that. It's important that there is a clear mandate for implementing the NIS directive. So I think saying this out loud is very, very important there. ENISA role, clarification of it, giving it basically a clear future roadmap is also, I think, very important from the package. And this also gives a very great cooperation opportunity, especially in the sector-based activities with the private sector, with the users, which is extremely important. So giving sort of a clear message that ENISA is going to be in the front and center of the implementation of the strategy is I think, important. And of course, the network for the European Cybersecurity Research Competence Centers, this is saying this is extremely important. I mean, this is a process that is ongoing in any case. So for example, you know, Estonia, Finland, Denmark, Sweden, Latvia, we are already in process of putting something like this together, and actually putting more resources into this process. I think this will considerably ease the process and make it more faster and more efficient, I think. And there is, of course, on the other hand side as well. Certification framework was obviously something that was discussed quite heatedly, and it is a kind of worms, positions from this side and another side, and this is definitely something that needs more clarification. One of the topics, replacement of everything that exists with the new one. Already in this panel, I got an answer that this is not the case, even though from the communications it might have looked like this. Also, the kind of a clearly stated voluntary nature of those new certification frameworks is something that is probably worth discussing, in a sense that when you have something that is voluntary, meaning that not everybody needs to adopt this, it will create a kind of a little bit market disruption, and it's going to be interesting how this plays out. So I think that should possibly be discussed also together with industry. The third-party liability, which was very briefly kind of touched upon, is always a question that raises heated discussion, and especially in a situation where the attribution of the cyber crimes, cyber attacks is it's somewhat difficult to accomplish, actually. So when you want to regulate and legislate the third-party liability without actually having the mechanisms in place in order to reliably attribute the attacks is going to be a problem, as well as I think the cyber insurance aspect is not exactly in the place where, because that's an enabler for a business, right? So if you want to do something in the cyber domain, you want to insure it, most likely. And cyber insurance is definitely not up there yet to actually take a role as a softening cushion for businesses. And finally, the investment part. The investments into capacity building, like a lot of comparisons were brought between US, right, who are I think putting like 17 billion into industrial base in order to do the capacity building. These kinds of instruments were not very clearly, at least in the communication, were not outlined. And secondly, of course, the foreign direct investment restrictions from third-party nations might be a little bit problematic in a sense that first, cybersecurity is extremely wide subject, right? So we are not talking about like encryption or it's a wide subject. It's a very horizontal subject, and even the message that the investments from the third countries might not be welcome in Europe is something that industry is probably not very happy about. Let's put it this way. It will create problems in accessing the external capital. It will create problems in actually bringing in talent into the enterprises, and of course the worst thing is that it's probably practically unenforceable, right? And to kind of regulate something that is not really enforceable is maybe not the best idea. But these were really like high-level remarks from yesterday's meeting. Let's put it this way. So we are committed to properly analyze the package and provide the feedback that we think went well and what might be improved in the strategy. And we are very, very open to cooperating in that because this environment that we are building, this is obviously crucial for European cybersecurity industry. So again, everybody who contributed, thank you.
Thank you, Martin. Since I missed the meeting yesterday, I'm very happy that I got an overview of what happened there. You want to reply or?
Yes, but maybe we should allow more questions.
Let's give you a chance. We
together.
only have 7 minutes left, so questions over there. Mr. Tanel Sepp. Please give your name, organization, and who you address the question to.
Thank you, Taimar. My name is Tanel Sepp from Estonian Minister of Defense, and I have a question to Ms. Spanou concerning yesterday's package. It was great news that it came out. But during the last years, cyber security and all kinds of cyber issues have become so sexy that everybody has started to deal with this. So it has created quite some confusion who does what. How does the new cyber package address this question, and does it clarify the roles and responsibilities within the EU institutions? Thanks.
Despina and Heli, would you like to take that?
Yes. Okay. Yes, absolutely. I think that in many respects, this is one of the roles of various documents in this package. For instance, in the blueprint, there is a very clear, and I really recommend that you read the annex because, especially for someone like you that works in the public sector, it outlines exactly how each actor fits in the ecosystem, in the incident response situation, of course. So I think that is already one area. Then the Act, the Cybersecurity Act, in defining ENISA's role, also clarifies where does that stop and where do other agencies or other actors come in. the structured cooperation with CERT-EU, etc. And in the blueprint, there is also a clarification with regard to the emergency response of the institution. So in the context of response, absolutely. On the strategic element, I think that the communication is quite clear, that was adopted yesterday, as to what is expected by everybody to produce. Of course, when you ask about the institutions between the External Action Service and the Commission, we always work jointly because it is a subject area where it is often difficult to distinguish between single market and external action, and we always have to consider one the other. But I think that there is a lot in the package that indeed provides clarifications. I don't know, Heli, if you want to.
I think when you read papers very with careful eye, then the blueprint gives a lot of details about who does what. The joint communication also tries to say about the actions, who will be implementing those actions. Maybe it's not so clear sometimes, and maybe we owe some explanation. If the audience feels this is the case, maybe we can do something in the horizontal working party, for instance, in Brussels for the member states. Like a chart, who is who, if you feel it's necessary. I think it's a valid criticism. Thank you.
Krasimir, you wanted to add?
Just in line with what was said here, to also complement this, and in our presidency trio program, we also have statement that we would like to see a clear EU institutional cyber map, and start from there actually to clarify who's doing what, who has to do what. So it's in our program as well.
There's a question over there.
Hello, Jacques Rosebandau from NXP Semiconductors. I have two questions, or maybe two comments on the voluntary part. You mentioned that already. So we are very much involved in certification since many years, and usually we have the experience that companies only do it if they are, let's say, someone is really asking for it. 2 points on this. One is, where is the duty of care if something is voluntary? We had the discussion about our childs, and if we have a voluntary approach, this means we need more attacks before will be aware of that we need something which is more than voluntary, which takes some years. If we're talking about the IoT, then we talk about, I think I heard 15 billion devices by 2020. 15 billion non-secure devices in a connected world is something I don't want to have, right? And probably there is some in this audience as well. So the question is whether what would be the way to go forward to have another goal here? And the second is, from a European perspective, we are the biggest market. We have a huge standing in cybersecurity. We have all the capabilities here, which do the other regions not have. So let's make it an opportunity out of it. Let's make a blueprint for the world on cybersecurity and IoT devices and services, and really sell this to the other regions. I don't expect we need to follow the others. We can do it, and we can offer it to the others to follow us.
Thank you. Since we are out of time, 10 minutes, okay? Oh, very generous. Thank you, Siim.
Can I bust the myth on certification a little bit, if I'm allowed, since there are so many comments? So first of all, I hear from all of you that I didn't hear anybody saying we didn't need an EU certification framework. Because if we didn't need it, there wouldn't have been also the great effort of the SOGAES, 13 member states, but important effort. But it's something that is only valid for the 13. It takes long, it costs a lot of money. I invite you to read our impact assessment. All this information is there. And we even have specific case studies in certain markets showing the before and after scenario. Why is it voluntary? Exactly because we have to start somewhere. You said it yourself. This market is proliferating much faster than we can anticipate. So what we have created is a system by which those that should know best, so in the member states, or the Commission, because it should keep an eye on what happens in the market, and the Commission is part of the contractual public-private partnership, part of policy making, speaks with member states, and ENISA can propose such schemes. So it is almost a market-driven process. And then you have the various assurance levels to also cover the various products and services. So it is voluntary simply because it would have been impossible to do something mandatory. At the same time, there is a provision in the proposal that allows this certification framework to be the point of reference for other vertical or sectoral legislation and become mandatory. So you can have laws that take as point of reference the system. So I think the aim of this proposal is exactly to try and create an advantage for those that wish to take the opportunity and to have something that is widely recognized, is solid, is through a system of verification and approval that is accredited, with procedures that have already been tested, with bodies that are equipped, and create also the expertise and the structure that will make a very solid certification culture in the European Union. So I believe it is a very solid basis. It does not do away with what exists. In fact, one of the options of our impact assessment was to try and see if you could make the SOGIS from 13 to the whole of the EU. But it was not the most practical solution, and this would disregard legal provisions that require existing EU legal norms that apply in such regulations. So I invite you all to read carefully the regulation. It is a regulation that has taken into consideration what exists, aims to build an efficient system by which within 6 to 9 months you can have a certificate that is valid across the EU, and that is really something that will change the market and bring the trust between service providers, the trust to end users or consumers, etc. So I think that just because maybe we were thinking of something else when we started discussing, let us give an opportunity to this proposal, because many of the comments I hear are integrated already. It just looks possibly different than what we started discussing, but it has evolved in a way that should serve better the market and consider also other parameters. For instance, yes, the role of the agency that is the only body today in Europe where you have some certification expertise in an EU agency. So we need to build on that. This is why we put ENISA in the proposal in the heart of the certification system. It has to assess the schemes that are proposed. It does not decide, but it has to assess. And therefore, it will build its experience and expertise in the field.
Thank you. You want to add something?
Yeah, I could maybe comment on specifically the IoT part of because this is going to be the next big challenge that we are going to have, and again in states it's rather visible what can happen there, well, globally really. But I'm a little bit skeptical about the succession that the vendors who actually voluntarily adopt the recommendations and make the investments into certifying their setups and so forth actually do gain particular market advantage, because time and time again, you know, the market has shown that they go to the cheapest possible alternative. So I'm a little bit worried that what might actually happen is that we end up in a situation where we punish those who adhere to the rules and certify their systems and so forth. And that is definitely something that shouldn't happen.
Question over there.
Juha Remes from Finnish Information Security Cluster, and I'm also chairman of the SME working group of EXO. And now once we bring up these certification issues, costs and so on, we have to also realize that our cybersecurity industry is mainly SMEs. And in that cybersecurity package which has put together, it's great, but you have not taken up very much of that issue there that the SME industry need to be also under the very great focus that we can be competitive with the worldwide as well. Because a lot of those players who we are up against are coming from the States, even in China, even Russia. So in that case, we need to build up the strong industry, and we have to start from the small companies as they are now.
I could reply. In fact, no, you're very right. Because of the body of the SME basis for this industry, this is one of the reasons why we thought it was very important to have this EU certification scheme that is in fact less costly and less cumbersome for small and medium-sized companies that right now cannot afford where the system exists to be certified. So this is one of the drivers actually of the new system. So normally it should accommodate this industry, the SME industry.
Thank you. Anybody else? Question over here. Just a second.
Thank you. I'm Liisa Past and I'm with the Estonian Information System Authority. And one of the very valuable but yet vague ideas that comes out of the document obviously is the competence centers. As Martin pointed out, it's a lively, let's call it marketplace already. There's regional hubs, there's national bodies that seek to do a similar thing. There's the NATO accredited centers of excellence, which there's a few dozen of by now. So from your very, very perspectives, what would be the unique added value? What's that these hubs or these competence centers could bring to the table for Europe? And that really, I guess, could go to all.
Oh, maybe others can reply from their perspective.
Let's maybe start with Martin.
What is the added value? I mean, when we talk about ongoing processes, right? So each individual kind of a market is way too small to go like end to end. And this is, of course, the strength of the European Union, that it is possible to pool together resources. It's possible to agree on common rules, how we do not duplicate efforts, how do we actually manage this both research as well as knowledge transfer into the commercial space, because this is also extremely important, because if it doesn't matter how great research is done in universities, if it doesn't reach the consumers, if it doesn't reach the market, it's really rather useless, right? So our idea has been that each kind of a member state should play to their strengths, right? So if in Estonia there is a very strong sort of R&D base in electronic ID, in the integrity space, in the blockchain, right? Then we should do it. And if in Finland, research is done on AI and so forth, they should do it, and then knowledge should be exchanged. And actually this knowledge transfer from the R&D to market, it can be unified together, right? So it's really an efficiency thing, as well as the overcoming the scarcity of the resources, because they are small countries, all of them. And of course, if you go to Germany's and France's of the world, then
anybody want to add? Yeah.
I'm not sure not to say something so too poetic or simple, but I think that as it's an organic space that is developing in a very speedy rhythm, we need to have this collective sharing of thoughts and of experience and learning. And we cannot have this done only by academics or industry, since in the end, part of the policy needs to be very well connected with this learning. So, I mean, what I say is very simple, but for us it was a very good point in this package that we go forward with this idea of this center.
So we have a time for very last question, very short, please.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thomas Fitchen from the German Federal Foreign Office. I wanted to say a word on the issue of norms among states. And the process right now is becoming very difficult. We need to continue that discussion. But I would like to appeal to our private sector and all the other colleagues working on this. Don't give up hope on the normative side. The Foreign Offices, the legal experts are working on it. It takes time, it's slow. Building consensus is very difficult, but this is also a track that EU colleagues and everybody else in the room at least should follow. With a little bit of time and a lot of goodwill, there may be results also on that field. Thank you very much. Just an appeal to everyone.
Thank you. So we can end with that positive note. That,
Yes.
But it's actually what the EU can do is when a lot of other countries are about to breaking the rules, then we are about to making the rules. I'll thank all the panelists, especially you, Despina. You handled very well. I very much enjoy hearing how you answer questions. It brings this warmth to this Nordic coldness. So please give applause to all the panelists.
Thank you.